insight into God's heart to equip us to overcome these four painful, but they're not just painful emotions, they're dangerous emotions. Because if we just let them run their course in us, we will be much more vulnerable to making very, very terrible decisions. So he's promised us joy and peace, but on his terms. And his terms are, we have to walk in the spirit of obedience, and we have to not let trouble dominate. Again, that's where so many people, they overlook that, they move on and wonder why they don't have joy and peace. Now, Paul said this in the same way, said the same principle, but he said it with different terminology, and I like his terminology. So I'm going to inject it here very quickly. He's really saying the same thing. When he says in Philippians 4, verse 6 and 7, he goes, don't be anxious for nothing, which is in essence, let not your heart be troubled. He's saying the same thing. He says by prayer. And he's not just talking about intercession for revival. He's talking about conversation with me. Through conversation with me, with thanksgiving. The peace of God will supernaturally guard your emotions, your heart, and it will guard the storm of crazy, dark thoughts in your mind. He said, if you will talk to me with thanksgiving, supernatural peace, how many of you would love to have peace to guard wrong, dark emotions and raging, dark thoughts? And, well, we all do. But in the hour of which we're living now, this is really critical that we make this a priority to interface with the Lord according to his promises. Now, it's this word thanksgiving that's really key. In these 50 sessions that myself and Stuart have taught in the last year and a half on Friday nights, and again, by the grace of God, Lord willing, we'll teach 50 more, and I think he is willing, actually. And that because I'm actually kind of doing it for myself. I want to really go deep in phrase after phrase after phrase after phrase. But the one principle I repeat over and over again is this. And it's so simple, but I want to urge you, don't neglect to do this. In these 5 chapters, but really anywhere in the Bible, it's not limited to these 5. When I see a promise, instead of going, yes, I stop and I turn that promise into conversation with a person. I say, almost always, I start off by saying, thank you. And I say the promise, show me more. And that very act of pausing to turn the truth or the promise into conversation, almost always I say another sentence or 2 or 3 or 4. And sometimes I'll go a minute or 2, and sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 10 seconds. The point is, when my heart is troubled and I take the promises and I turn them into conversation, and not just, I believe you, Lord, I thank him and I ask him to show me more. Again, usually I add a few more sentences to it. It will come spontaneous. If you will do that simple thing, turning the promise and the truth into conversation, I assure you, I want to assure you, based on the word of God, in time, that conversation, that prayer with thanksgiving that's specific, you will have peace and joy emerge in your heart progressively over the months and years ahead. It's the simplest thing, but it's critical. I want my heart guarded from dark emotions and dark thoughts because the escalation of darkness is greatly increasing. Well, let's look at Roman numeral 2. Roman numeral 2. Let's go back 2 days earlier to Tuesday. Now, if you don't connect what Jesus said on Tuesday with what he says here in John 13 and 17 on Thursday, you'll miss a lot if you don't connect the two. So really, he's in the same conversation. And on Tuesday, he specifically addressed issues where they could overcome particularly these 4 negative dark emotions, but others besides. Paragraph B. To better understand what he said on Thursday night in the upper room at the Last Supper, John 13 and 17, we go back to what he said on Tuesday, just 2 days before. Now notice, on Tuesday, he's telling the crisis. On Thursday, he's telling them the conversation with him that would give them peace and joy in the crisis. I'm going to say that again. Tuesday, he lays out the crisis. And one reason he tells them, he's telling them, none of this surprises me. I have authority over all of it. It's all a part of my plan. I've got a way for you to overcome, but I'm not going to tell you till Thursday. So on Thursday, he tells them the conversation they would have with him, the truths and promises